Welcome to SCP Cafe. This is 2019, week 13. I'm your host, Blue Soul, SCP Wiki moderator, chat operator, subreddit moderator, author, loving husband, dog petter, cologne aficionado, and JamCon winner announcer. We're going to do the full JamCon show on Wednesday, but I did want to go ahead and announce the winners. As I've kind of discussed, I will be doing a JamCon special, and I will get into each of these in depth on that show. But for now, I do want to go ahead and congratulate the winners. We had 3 days with 3 different topics. Day 1, the topic was simply Shaggy Dog, and people took that a number of different ways, from true Shaggy Dog stories to stories about Shaggy Dogs to Shaggy Dog stories about Shaggy Dogs. So at the end of the day, we had a winner in SCP-4290 titled The Child Hungers by 9volt, and a tie for second. And you know how I said I was going to do, the top 2? I didn't anticipate this. I didn't anticipate having a tie, but I have a plan for this. Our tied runners-up are SCP-4464, Dogs Could Be Bigger by Mortos, and SCP-4844, Last Man Standing by Ty Gently. For day 2, the topic was Pulp Fiction, and the winner, SCP-4513, with a nod to Chuck Tingle with Pounded in the Butt with Moby Dick by my IRS W-2 tax form by Rounderhouse, and the runner-up, SCP-4494, titled The Spectre Fights for Justice, also by Morto. So 2 second place finishes out of 2, and day 3, the theme was titled So It Was All a Dream. And our winner is a 001 proposal, not a seagull, and their proposal won, with the runner-up being SCP-4269, Fuck With the Lights Turned On by Othello the Cat. Now, given that Mortos placed twice in here, and we have a tie in day 1, and I really don't want to run through 7 skips, I will probably sort of shorten the day 1, cover Ty Gently's in depth, and just a much shorter recap of Mortos' 4464, and then give Mortos the longer treatment on the day 2 4494 skip. So those are your winners and runners-up. All of those will be covered on the Wednesday JamCon special, and hope you give it a listen, and I'm looking forward to doing it. I've really gone out of my way not to get spoiled on these, and so I'll be reading them for the first time the day of, and I'm looking forward to it. I trust all of the names that I see in these winners and runners up, so really looking forward to that show. Also wanted to discuss some new items coming to the SCP Cafe store. I have some new access cards that will not require your photo as the fully customizable one does. I have designs for those up, and they'll be linked from the scp.cafe website when this podcast is uploaded. Additionally, there are 2 shirts. There's an MTF Epsilon 11 Nine-Tailed Fox shirt, which I am currently wearing, and if you are getting this via an all-audio podcast, if you go to the YouTube page, which is linked from the top of scp.cafe, you can hit the archived show for this recap show. It's titled Week 13 Live Stream, and you can see the shirt as I do the show this week. Additionally, there is a simpler shirt. It's a very small, redacted in brackets, and this is on an Adidas super lightweight tee. I am on the fence on whether I'm going to actually run with trying to sell this. It is quite expensive for me to buy, and the materials that go into placing the design are also more expensive than all of my other shirts. So all things considered, the shirts are normally selling for $14.95. I can't see a way to hit that number on the redacted shirt. I would be in the hole selling it at that price, and I'm not exaggerating that. So I'm playing with that. I'm talking with suppliers and seeing what I can do to get the number down, or I may simply have to sell it at a higher price. But in any event, pictures for all of them will be available on scp.cafe. Let me know your thoughts on them, either in the IRC or via the mailbag. You can send email, and this is something that I'm going to try, to mailbag@scp.cafe. And you can send me whatever you like. If you have questions about the previous week's show, if you have things you want to talk about as far as the Foundation, or writing or deconstructing works, or if you want to talk about pro wrestling or men's cologne, all for it. I may not take those questions and repeat them on the air, but sure, I'll chat with you on just about anything. So yeah, mailbag@scp.cafe is another way you can get a hold of me. Quick little update on the subscriber numbers. Spotify, we passed 500 followers this week, just on Tuesday. Went over the 500 mark, and it's a little harder to get numbers for most of the other outlets, but one thing I would like to draw your attention to and could really actually use your help on is the YouTube page. I'm sitting right now at the time of this recording at 62 subscribers. YouTube enables some little perks and quality of life improvements for content creators at the number 100. So it's getting a little closer, but I'm going to make this little request, and I've never done this before, but if you have a YouTube account and you enjoy the podcast, do me a favor and subscribe. That does unlock some stuff for me that would generally make life easier to work with the platform. And right now, as far as monetization for videos, there is none. So it's nothing really along those lines. It has to do with customizing the account and URLs and that sort of stuff. And I would really like to get those set up and, kind of get it over with. So yeah, would appreciate subscribing on YouTube if you're enjoying the show. And, that also, you've seen the schedule at this point, 1 a week, maybe 2, if there's something special going on. So won't hammer you with notifications either. All of that said, week 13 was an outstanding week. There were some really, really good works this week. 17 SCPs in scope, and it took some real deliberation to get this down to 5. I was stuck at 7 for quite a while, and getting this to 5 was one of the more difficult things in the last few weeks. So we are going to get started with SCP-4889, titled An Easy Mark, written by Rock Teeth Moth Eyes. So on 4889, there were no pictures anywhere in the document. We have an object class of Euclid and procedures that read early containment procedures, which would lead me to believe this is sort of a provisional entry. We're still hammering out the details of what exactly we are faced with. And it indicates that the forested area that the skip is located in is surrounded by 2 meter tall chain link fencing in a 120 meter radius from its exact location. Our interaction with the skip is currently restricted to remote observation until more information about -A is known and a safe method of capture for it is proposed. And secondary objectives include identifying -A's origin and known relatives. And that's the entirety of it. So we are early in the game on this one, and we are still collecting data to determine what the next step is. Our description indicates that 4889 is a snowshoe hare, 49 centimeters in length, located approximately 9 kilometers northeast of Lake Kavanaugh in Washington state. And the hare is unable to leave the rock it stands on. The bottom of its paws are fused to the rock by unknown means, and in addition, the skip possesses a regenerative trait, being able to replace lost tissue and organs. And -A is a human of indeterminate age, though presumed to be in its mid-20s. Its clothing has not changed since its discovery. One interesting thing with this we go a little further down the entry. As a matter of fact, I think we go end to end. We sure do. We don't even indicate whether Dash A is masculine or feminine in appearance, which makes the visualization of it a bit difficult. So moving on, though, approximately 2 hours after snowfall in the area that the skip resides in, the Dash A will appear and devour the skip alive. The process varies in length anywhere from 30 minutes to 2 hours, and about 30 minutes afterwards, the skip will begin regenerating its organs and rebuilding torn muscle and flesh and regain consciousness. And we are inferring from observation that Dash A appears to be doing this out of survival, though it's also possible that it is doing so ritualistically. And the remainder of the work is an observation log of Dash A approaching this hare. So we have apparently placed a camera somewhere where we can observe this and also hear. The Dash A enters the frame and approaches the skip, and Dash A is limping and favoring his right leg. It does say its right leg. It's very interesting. In my reading of this, I sort of mentally painted the picture that this was a male. There's absolutely nothing in here that indicates that, but I'm also going to struggle to not say his and he during this, simply because that was the picture that I sort of mentally painted. So forgive me if that was not the intent of the work. But in any event, the Dash A he crouches down and notices the hare is panicked and trying to leave the stone that it's on, but it can't. So he crouches down and sort of shushes it, tries to put it at ease, and is petting the hare, and it ceases moving, but is still very obviously bothered and breathing quickly. He comments that the hare is a little bigger than the last time, and it must have either been several days since the last snow, or maybe there was a little bit of meat left over. And as sort of petting the hare, and inadvertently makes a noise suggesting the retracting of saliva, that sort of sound, which visibly startles the hare, and tries to, shush the hare and calm it a little bit more. And then he says, "Brother came to visit me. Said that he's almost done with college. I told you about that, right? I think I did. I didn't say anything. I don't really want to. He knows that. I know he knows that. It's not why he came, though. He told me Dad started coughing up again. He said it's because it's my fault. How is it my fault if I don't know how much I should eat?" I told him, "You act like you've got it harder than me," and he didn't like that, not one bit. What am I supposed to do, right? He ain't helping me. Dad definitely ain't helping me. If he's so alive and well, where is he? You know what he said? "I'm sorry." That's all he ever says when he has to do this. But he doesn't mean it. I know he doesn't mean it. They should be thanking me. I did more for them than they'll ever do for me. And at this point, the human lifts its hands off of the rabbit. It's still for about 20 seconds. Shifts onto his knees, lowers its head. Mumbling is heard, but we can't pick it up from the camera. It bends down, holding its face in its hands, and everything's still for about 5 minutes. Then sharply inhales and draws a thin knife from its boot and stabs the blade into the hare, and the hare screams. The human says, "Stop, please stop," placing his free hand on the skip and begins carving through the muscle. The skip continues to scream, struggling to move. The human says, "Please just stop." The Dash A pulls out chunks of muscle and organs from the hare while it shrieks. He tugs the muscle away from connective tissues and places a few pieces into its mouth. The hare screams louder. He says, "I said stop crying," and bashes its fist down on the hare's skull and neck 4 times, each time making contact with the stone it's resting on. It doesn't lift up its neck, and he sets down the meat on the stone and lifts up the rabbit's head. It beats the skull 10 more times. He says, "I'm sorry." He lets go of the hare and it falls limp. The human resumes its previous position after 30 seconds, looks at the viscera on the stone, hesitantly picks out a piece of flesh, proceeds to eat it slowly. While chewing, it carves out more meat from the hair. This continues for approximately 39 more minutes. They're both silent during this time. End log, end article. This is a beautiful, cold, horrible painting that this work has created. Unfortunately, I think it is marred by not giving quite enough detail to properly place it. The mental picture that I paint for this is, a cold, snowy scene, a rabbit on a rock in a clearing with, maybe a couple 100 feet of empty space around it. For whatever reason, that's the mental picture that I paint for this. And I picture, a young man, early 20s, perhaps not dressed for the area, perhaps, appearing to have been placed in this area through unknown means. And we do not spend enough time painting that picture. And that's unfortunate because the log is good. There was a lot of dialogue this week that I felt was, below usual standards, but this was really good. And I would have liked to have seen a little bit more time taken in setting the scene just a little bit better. But despite that, this is still, it's beautiful in its stark, terrible picture that it paints. And for that, this is still a very easy +1 for me. This is currently at +31, and I find it underrated there. This does not take a lot of deep reading, but it does leave a lot of questions as to why are we here? How did we get here? And this doesn't attempt to answer most of those questions, which I think works in its favor. We are establishing that this is early in the game, so we don't have the information that you're seeking, the answers to those questions. We are really only just finding out about this ourselves. Now, that also leads me to ask, how did we find this? We have early containment procedures, but how did we come upon this scene? How did we find this anomalous being and this anomalous ritualistic, killing and eating of this hair? 9 kilometers northeast of a lake in Washington State is probably in the middle of fucking nowhere at all. So this came to our attention. We have, eyes in a lot of places, but nevertheless, the circumstances that would lead to discovering this would be pretty radical, and it would take a lot to draw the conclusions that this is actually a skip in the first place. So I would like to see a little bit more time spent on a discovery log, and I would like to see a little more of a picture painted in the description of the -A. This is still a +1 though, just for the emotions that this observation log evokes. I think they did an outstanding job. Moving on, SCP-4275. This is titled The Old Man of the Sea, written by Agent Fish. So, like 4889, we have no images, and we also have an object class of Euclid. A short set of procedures. The skip is to stay put. It's to remain where it's currently at. We have an exclusion zone of 200 meters established with warning buoys and underwater surveillance, so it is presumably underwater. Monitoring is handled by a liaison within the Port Authority, and we have embedded assets in the nearby Coast Guard station that can be called in should a cascade event result in an instance of -1. And the skip is described as a granite statue located underwater at a depth of 18 meters, 5 kilometers off Sandy Hook Barrier Spit in New Jersey. It depicts a muscular male over 50 dressed in attire common to fishermen and dock workers in the early 20th century. Sedimentary analysis places it at its current location since the 30s, and the skip is affixed to a concrete base by spikes of naval brass driven through the feet. Samples of both the concrete and the brass are consistent with materials that were produced in New England during World War II, and samples of the statue show unusual structure consistent with petrified tissue. So we have a number of things already going on in the description, just in this first paragraph, that we have anachronisms in the materials versus when the thing appears to have been placed, and additionally petrified tissue actually comprising the statue. So a number of things to all sort of unsettle you or give you something to think about right from the beginning. We have found that damage to the skip produces anomalous effects even if the damage is not visible. Natural erosion causes moderate discomfort in humans and animals within 5 meters, but any greater damage has dangerous and unpredictable effects, including aggressive behavior in animals, nautical mishaps, earthquakes, storm activity, thaumasonic shock waves, and irreversible physical and mental transmutation of nearby humans designated -1. So that's gnarly. And danger exists of a cascade event wherein the damage results in further damage, and due to this risks, we have postponed testing. We are no longer doing any testing now that we have figured that out, that is problematic. We have an addendum of an abridged list of notable incidents. We have a 4 cubic millimeter chip removed from the skip, and in doing so, 3 draft horses being transported by ferry broke their restraints and ran rampant, resulting in multiple injuries but no human fatalities. And we had a 1 cubic centimeter chip removed for testing, and we had a 3.9 magnitude earthquake felt in Long Island. Given that this was just off the coast of New Jersey, that's not, 3.9 you can feel, but that's still a fairly small piece to cause, an earthquake of any magnitude, obviously. This is where we noted the correlation and began investigating. We falsified the epicenter in geological data, which I like the little flexing of the authority that the foundation has to do such things. And then we have a black box date where the other 2 were not redacted. And we had an incident that is struck through that read an accidental release of anchor from a Foundation research vessel. And instead, it says attempted seismic scan of internal structure by the same Foundation research vessel. And the damage was internal, likely originating from the spikes used to affix the statue to the base, followed by significant scoring damage on the back of the statue. And this was our cascade event and the only known creation of an instance of the -1. The outcome of this creation of the -1 is that Foundation naval assets were called in to commence a long-range bombardment, and this was successful in terminating the -1 and also halted the cascade event. We produced a cover story about naval war games that was disseminated to media, and the site director then approved salvage of the skip to avoid further incidents. And we have a note below that says, it was not known at the time that movement would cause internal damage. We believed this was the fault of investigating researchers, but it's now believed the release of the research vessel was induced by the skip itself. So that's food for thought. We are placing the blame on what is described up to this point as a statue, an anomalous statue, but now we are sort of putting out there that it potentially caused this. So something to consider as we go into one more incident log. This was the attempted salvage of the skip. We wrapped the object in waterproof padding and secured it with a chain, but we managed a 6 centimeter long crack in the left foot, and this caused massive thaumasonic discharge, the outcome being that 2 agents in the water expired instantly from internal liquefaction, and 3 agents on deck suffered psychogenic cardiac arrest. 1 was successfully resuscitated, but suffered permanent loss of hearing. At this point, we hang it up on salvage operations. So that is the end of the first addendum, and this has done a good job to this point in setting the stakes. The the object class of Euclid initially gave me pause, but I think it is the correct classification for the what we know about it up to this point and the results. So going into a second addendum, we were executing an unrelated raid and found their target, which was a former salvage diver designated POI 13322, deceased via petrification, and samples of the statue matched the same composition of our skip. And we retrieved numerous items and documents, but several relevant items were also recovered. Security footage between this POI and another POI, 5176, a handwritten note likely from the same POI 5176, and a brass plaque matching materials and residue from our skip. We have security footage, and it reads that this was digitally recorded on an external drive. The camera was rendered inoperable by calcification of internal components, and extremely poor audio quality due to microphone placement near an air vent. So, well, that's unfortunate. We have now. Here's the thing with digital recordings. What we have is the footage still has video attached. So this is not immediately clear what's going on because we just set the stakes and set the stage rather that the camera was rendered inoperable, but the log shows things that could only be determined via video. So digital, tends to be a digital system that is a 1 or 0 and it works or it doesn't. So this would actually benefit from potentially being analog, from being in such a way that you can have shades of gray, shades of crappy with video quality. As it is, the video quality is not degraded enough in this log to really even sell the calcification of internal components in the first place. So you have a couple of things that could be done here. You remove the line that says the camera was rendered inoperable because the log contradicts that, or make, more of an attempt to show poor video quality, though I don't think you can really effectively do that. I think you're better off simply removing that the camera was rendered inoperable, because it doesn't generally make sense unless I'm really misunderstanding something about what we are accomplishing here. In any event, we have, I'm going to call them POI A and B, just so I don't have to keep saying 13322 and 5176. I will refer to 13322 as A and 5176 as B because that was the order in which they were introduced. A escorts B into his office. She's wearing sunglasses and a headscarf, and red hair is visible underneath. A motions forward to take a seat. She remains standing, pacing the room, examining objects. We have no intelligible dialogue for the next 3 minutes and change. A pulls out 2 bundles wrapped in handkerchiefs and tries to draw B's attention. He grows visibly annoyed as she makes small talk but otherwise ignores him. B reaches a plaque on the wall and pauses, and her body language becomes rigid, and frame analysis shows movement under the headscarf. Again, if our camera is that, inoperable, we probably won't have the significant video quality to detect movement under a headscarf in that way. We then have 2 seconds of camera distortion. The POIA stands and starts showing off the plaque. They appear to be bragging, and he does not appear to notice B's discomfort. B turns suddenly and points at A and raises her voice. A grabs her by the wrist, and there's significant movement under the headscarf of B at this point. At this point, there are 7 seconds of camera distortion, at which time you can hear raised voices followed by a loud crash and a metallic tearing sound. The footage cuts back in. B is clutching the plaque in her hand. We have a footnote here that notes that the walls are constructed of sheet metal and the plaque appears to have been riveted in place. A is slumped against the opposite wall, struggles to stand and appears dazed. B drops the plaque on the desk. B crosses the room and lifts A off the floor. She strikes him 3 times across the face, causing significant bleeding and orbital fracture. Slams A against the desk, cracking the desk. The previously visible hair is no longer visible. B releases A, begins removing the headscarf and sunglasses, and at this point the feed cuts out. And since this incident, there have been no confirmed sightings of B, and she remains at large. Due to her display of anomalous abilities, she is considered a high-value target. We have a handwritten note that was written with a ballpoint pen. Handwriting analysis indicates emotional distress. That's an interesting line. It's actually something I'm just nerd enough to have gotten into in my, in a previous life, the whole handwriting analysis thing. You actually can spice that up a little bit. There's good Wikipedia entries out there for all of the things that, like anger hooks and things that tend to indicate for people that believe in handwriting analysis, emotional distress. And you can use some of those little, fancy little words to put that out there. We find this note attached to the plaque with clear plastic tape. The letterhead matches paper found in the office, and the tape matches roll found on the desk. And the ink also matches pens found in the office. So this is very obviously just something that was thrown together. And the text of the note reads, "O Foundation, this plaque was meant as an epitaph for a dead god. His body is in your possession not far from here. Please return this to its rightful place at his feet. His crimes must never be forgotten. Sic semper dies, thus ever to gods." And it is signed M with the remaining letters black boxed. The plaque is 18 centimeters by 12 centimeters, made of naval brass, and further waterproofed with sealing wax. The rivet hole locations and residue match the base of our skip. The inscription reads, "Poseidon, Rapist." End article. We've introduced this character that, without a shadow of a doubt, is Medusa, and it becomes more and more evident as the article goes on, and I appreciate the organic sort of build for that. All in all, I think this it requires some amount of a following of Greek mythology, but that's also something that's been hammered into most people at this point to a sufficient extent that this still carries, still has impact. And there's not a lot else to say. This is really well done. If you consider that the context, the ramifications of the last 2 notes, the note and the plaque, this is really well put together and worth a reread once you get to the ending, then go back and go, oh shit, that's what's going on. So this is outstanding, and I want to put out, to the best of my knowledge, this is a first-time piece. So big congratulations, outstanding work. I find this underrated at its current plus 36. So well done. Easy +1 for me. Moving on. SCP-4905, Intergalactic Techno-Vikings and the Great Moon Wars. Love the title. This was written by Mini Meats. So we have an image of the moon, and the caption reads, "Multiple battle sites of SCP-4905. Procedures indicate that image recognition algorithms embedded within public and private research centers are to flag and forward any ongoing research relating to the lunar surface. MTF Row 3, The Hills Have Eyes, is assigned to analyze and quarantine any data and imagery related to the skip or its potential detection. We have monthly site integrity surveys being carried out by Foundation researchers located at Lunar Area 32, and survey samples are to monitor for biogenic molecules and other complex organic compounds. In the event that these particles are sampled at a value greater than 1,000 parts per cubic centimeter, the area is to target the areas of highest concentration and launch ancillary site warheads during a period of minimal lunar visibility. Good luck with that, launching nukes on the moon and hoping nobody sees. I have bad news for how that's going to go. In any event, the description indicates that 4905 is the designation for a collection of battlefields centered around the selenographic North Pole of Earth's moon. And there's a footnote that selenographic has to do with latitude and longitude that we use to map the moon using the same cardinal directions that we have on Earth. These battlefields relate to a mass conflict between humans that culturally identify as Vikings and an invasive insectoid species. I shit you not. That's what it says. We first noticed this skip in 1966. Photographs showed metallic reflective compounds visible from several major craters. We successfully quarantined this information until we could do more detailed analysis, and excavation and inventory took place between 1998 and 2002 after the Foundation presence at Lunar Area 32 had been established. I like the timing of this, that, 98 to 2002 was a weird time for everybody. Apparently the Foundation was busy quite literally putting a man on the moon, and beyond that, building a moon base. The work goes on to say that we collect a number of cultural relics that were linked to clans of Northern Europe. The DNA has been destroyed due to cosmic radiation, but due to the crafting techniques and styles of materials used and so on and so forth, we have narrowed this down to a style used in Oslo, Norway, circa 1050. And despite the apparent age of these relics, many of the objects were found to have been heavily modified using metallurgical techniques and other enhancements well beyond the scope and capabilities of their originating culture. So what we have next is an incomplete manifest of heavily modified cultural artifacts and the anomalies sites. So we have 18 longboats, each one measuring about 21 meters in length, but they had been fitted with plates of a magnesium silicon carbide and a posterior thruster array powered by indeterminate means. We also have 2,218 single-edged weapons, similar in form to a bearded axe. The head of each axe, however, is composed of a dense material containing Moscovium-290, which is an only recently created synthetic element with a half-life of 650 milliseconds. This Moscovium-290 is stabilized via unknown processes. Trace amounts of this material are shed in the course of use, which undergoes rapid radioactive decay, inhibits platelet formation and cellular regeneration in wounds. So I like the juxtaposition, and it's easy when you have the title Techno Vikings that you can blend these things in this way. I still think it's cool. And we have -1, which is the designation for a group of insectoid organisms of an indeterminate origin. We haven't completely recovered any intact specimens, but we have a number of partials that were salvaged and brought back to the lunar site for study. Each one of these specimens featured one or more of those bearded axes lodged either in center mass or in the primary ganglia of the creature, and that's a fancy bug term, and a quick Google search tells you actually absolutely nothing. It's a nerve cell cluster, so you assume this is something in the brain, like these were embedded either in center mass or into the brain of the creature. And these carcasses often bore multiple embedded weapons or showed wound patterns consistent with multiple lethal strikes. The article describes 3 constituent sites composing SCP-4905. They're geographically separate. Each site has a cylindrical monolith made of an unidentified non-reactive material. Each one stands at about 6 meters in height, and we've reconstructed portions of them, and they feature relief carvings of Viking warriors wielding weapons, arrayed in combative poses or military formations, and the middle band of each cylinder displays text. carved in a runic language, and the purpose or intent of the text is unknown, and we are conducting further study along those lines. So what we have for the rest of the work is a description of 3 different sites, and each one is the site of a battle. And in the case of the first site, the battle strongly favored the insectoids. We found several specimens of the insectoids recovered with numerous layers of regenerated exoskeletal matter, and that may explain why later we find these bearded axes with this radioactive material that can prevent such things. We have multiple ocular cortical implants discovered among Viking remains that suggest that these Vikings were cybernetically enhanced. There's a pretty thorough description of various cybernetics attached to the eyes and the wrists and the connected directly into bones in the arm and into the jaw, in the case of some rebreathers. We end this describing the monolith located in this site, and the monolith appears to have been destroyed as a result of the conflict. Tool marks and scoring present in the debris suggest the destruction of this pillar may have been done intentionally by defending Viking forces. We successfully reconstructed the artifact, yielding the following translation from text that reads, "Cattle die, kinsmen die, you yourself die. One thing now that never dies, the fame of a dead man's deeds. So do we write to color the runes, written against the stars, stained with our blood. O'er long summers we gather, beckoned to Aegir's hall. Tales for our grandchildren, make for ancestors' pride. Vanaheimer." And we have footnotes, a few footnotes in place. And the last one being the Old Norse name for Vanaheim, the home of the Vanir. And that wraps up the first site. The second site appears to be ground zero for the detonation of some anomalous event, and during this event it resulted in the instantaneous conversion of all organic matter present in the crater to bone, and perhaps beyond the crater. And due to substantial degradation of remains and the wide scope of this particular battlefield, the true number of casualties is impossible to measure. The remains of this monolith are located near the ignition point of that event, and the anomalous properties of the detonation didn't appear to have affected the materials, but the concussive force of the blast was sufficient to destroy the artifact where it stood. We've partially reconstructed this one and yielded the text, "Bones of our fathers, bones of our sons, bones of a brother, fought and won. Thus we dwelt 3 nights long, battle did end by brother's hand, jaws of Fenris wolf swallow all, Utgard," the Old Norse name for Jotunheim, the world of giants. And lastly, we have Site 3, and this was located in an open field outside the anomalous detonation zone. This is the largest concentration of remains for both forces, and this battle seems to center around a particularly big fucking insect designated -1-alpha, and this alpha is nearly 54 meters in length. That is a very large bug, and it appears that this was a deep incursion into Viking territory, and the Vikings responded appropriately. We obviously can't really go into what exactly happened in the battle, but we can determine that a significant number of these advanced weapons were located throughout the interior of Dash Alpha and at various depths within its exoskeleton. We determined that the Vikings apparently left by entering through the external openings on the insects or exploiting inflicted wounds. We also find shattered hulls of several Viking longboats around this corridor, this kill zone, and the bow of each ship had been breached in a manner that suggests high-speed impact. This is the only site we've found that such tactics were used. At the apparent conclusion of the battle, Dash Alpha was stopped along with the remaining mass of the insects. A number of weapons, circular shields, and other discarded implements of war were left behind in a circular fashion, presumably for ritualistic or celebratory implications. And the monolith here is located in close proximity to the remains of this alpha. The artifact was not destroyed as a result of the battle, but the surface was defaced or stripped, and an inscription was made sometime after construction. This tool marks it lacks the precision of the other carvings, and we believe that this was added impromptu. And the translation reads, "Shoulder by shoulder, Vikinger stand. Here we fought, here we bled, till Angerboda quaked, and ground drank her ichor. Wreathed in rage her children swelled, resolve holds heavy our feet, valor holds strong our spears. Lands of Mani washed clean, by the shores of the river run with our blood. They are safe. Tomorrow comes, Midgard." That's the world of man. And that's where we end the article. So we have this fantastical world of techno-Vikings battling insect forces on the moon with unbelievable technology that we can't even fully understand now to make use of for our own ends. It is, delightful in its anachronisms. I for whatever reason, the choosing of Vikings and Viking lore for this, I think really works for me. I really enjoy the inclusion. There's a lot to like here. I think it did a good job in honestly a pretty short amount of time getting building empathy and creating these insects that are relentless and had to be defeated through these really unconventional means. And the thought that all of this is happening on the moon, we have no idea how the fuck any of these people got there, what they're breathing, how any of it's really working from the insect perspective. I mean, it leaves you questioning a lot. Like, there's a lot of what the hell, like why how did we get here? But honestly, that is we've done enough hand waving of that away that says we found it, we diverted it, and that's kind of all you need to know. We handled it. Mind your own business. The one thing that's interesting to me is back in the procedures, we have this last sentence of the procedures. In the event that biogenic particles should sample at a value greater than 1,000 parts per cubic centimeter, Lunar Area 32 is to target the areas of highest concentration and launch ancillary site warheads during a period of minimal lunar visibility. So the rest of the work doesn't bear out that we have any really active concerns with this skip, with anything about the sites that we found. It's why it has an object class of safe. I'm not sure what that particular passage buys, because it's not, in my opinion, not properly followed up on. If there was something, some sort of callback to that, I would have a different, opinion on it, obviously. But that is a minor nitpick in what was honestly a pretty well-constructed piece and a well-constructed little universe all in its own right. This is currently fairly low rated. This is only at plus 17 at the moment. So please give it a read. I did gloss over quite a bit just in the interests of time and length. So I encourage you to give it a read. I found this to be a pretty easy +1. Moving on. SCP-4350, titled I See Yellow People, written by Jowoan, and I believe this is the second in 2 weeks from this author. What we have is an image of a gray sedan, and the subtitle reads, "A vehicle fitted with SCP-4350 instances." We have an object class of neutralized with a footnote that reads, "Formerly Euclid," and procedures that indicate that as of May 13th, 2010, I'm assuming this is not in a date format that I suggest you use. This is 5/13/10. As a rule, use use 2-digit months, 4-digit years whenever possible. I like the ISO standard 4-digit year dash 2-digit month dash 2-digit day. There is never any confusion using that format, but using, if this was 5, 11, 10, I would have no idea what order to, take those in. In any event, I'll get off the soapbox there. We discontinued the procedures on that day, May 13th, 2010. We have archived procedures that indicate that all 4350 instances within the legally defined boundaries of Laurel Creek, California, USA are to be removed from the respective vehicle, replaced with foundation-approved glass replacements, and stored in standard storage lockers at Site 48, and the owners of affected vehicles are to be administered Class B amnestics. The description indicates that 4350 is the collective designation for the stock window panes of the 8th generation Mitsubishi Galant. And when an individual looks through an instance of these window panes, while within the city of Laurel Creek, California, they will be able to perceive humanoid-shaped entities, yellow in color, estimated to be 4 meters tall. They can be photographed and videotaped through these windows. Instances of -1 do not possess any facial features or bodily orifices and are thin and translucent. So these -1 are not visible from outside the window and will phase through humans in a manner similar to a hologram. That's an interesting phrase. I don't know how holograms phase through things, to be quite honest. So it's not, it may actually be similar. It may be easier to say, like, it will phase through humans, just do the more straightforward, like they're intangible, they're incorporeal, whatever word you want to use. But throwing in, it behaves like a hologram, it's like, well, shit, I don't spend a lot of time around holograms. I don't really know how they work or why exactly we drew that analogy. Does it do anything to really set the scene for how they behave? The answer in the work is no, it really doesn't. So it is, it's something to consider when you add these little details. Be careful not to yank the reader out of their immersion when you do it. There's a sentence that follows. It says, the entities can only be viewed through SCP-4350 instances. We established this, I think, repeatedly through the work already, and this is a redundant sentence. This can be removed. The glass will continue to reveal -1 instances when removed from the vehicle. I like that. I think that's an interesting little touch to it. -1 instances cannot be viewed through the window panes of any other motor vehicle, including older and newer Mitsubishi Galants. This is, again, perhaps redundant. The number of -1 instances visible will vary based on the location from which they're viewed, but will not appear outside the city boundaries of Laurel Creek. So the concern with something of this nature, when we have a skip or entities that for whatever reason will only exist or manifest within the confines of something very prosaic like city boundaries, it's a little hard to swallow, because city boundaries are so artificially constructed through bureaucracy and changes on, a fairly consistent basis. I don't think, generally speaking, that buys you anything as a writer. There is, because we don't follow up, we don't do anything to say why Laurel Creek. It may be easier to say that we've only found it within a radius of X meters. Perhaps there's an epicenter that we also can't figure out where or why, but it will not appear outside these city boundaries. It's like, these skips obey zoning laws. That's kind of odd. And it does, and it can throw you out of the immersion. It's like, well, why Laurel Creek? Why do these entities obey the city limits? We don't really explore that in the work. And in truth be told, even if we did, it would probably double the length of it just to get to a meaningful conclusion. So we have a discovery log that goes more or less as you would expect. A Foundation agent rented a car in Laurel Creek. It happens to be the affected windows and could see these anomalous big yellow humanoids. And about 6 weeks later, a civilian posted a video on social media taken from the inside of their vehicle, and in the video, multiple of these -1 instances are present. We took the video, replaced the instances with non-anomalous glass, and administered amnestics. Now, the thing here, like, this all happens in a pretty short amount of time. We were able, in a pretty short span, were we really able to identify it was the glass and not the vehicle itself, to such an extent that we replaced the glass in the vehicle on our first civilian interaction with the skip. It's an interesting thing to think about, and it actually gives you more room to work in as a writer, to play with these discovery logs and, either build tension, because tension is probably the one thing that this piece overall lacks. We have an interview log after this that it is between an agent, and they are attempting to interview -1 instances, and they are, and I'm going to pause again because we have this interviewer that is an agent, but the dialogue is much more in line with a D-Class's dialogue. But we say agent several times in this piece. I think it would be more likely, like, you could switch this to a D-Class and nobody would bat an eye. We do that constantly, and you could keep the dialogue. Or if you want to keep it as an agent for whatever reason, you could, the tone of the dialogue needs work, because I find it very hard to believe that an agent says okay in an attempt to make contact with the yellow entity, and shouting through the passenger window, "Hey you, yellow guy, over here." I find that really hard to believe. It is very unlike the Foundation to behave in such ways. So these -1s seem to be able to communicate by placing thoughts directly into the head of the agent, and they're asking, "Can you see us? Do you know what we are?" And says, "You should not be able to see us." And the entities then say, "We have not seen this glass before. We must adapt to it." And the -1s move towards the vehicle, stretch their arms forward, and make contact with it. The glass begins to rattle, and from the outside, the glass just appears to be rattling for no apparent reason. And after a bit, the instances begin to evaporate from view of the windows, and then they are gone, and we end the log. So I'm glossing over a lot because I think it needs a bit of a revisit. The tone throughout is very similar to what I would expect from a D-Class and not from a Foundation agent. More to the point, it needs some general work. It needs a little bit of cleanup just for believability. You can always apply that test of speaking your dialogue and seeing how it sounds, how natural it sounds. In my tales, I've done that in, everything that I've put out there that has dialogue. I always speak it, or at least mutter it to myself, much like these podcasts, to make sure that I'm not getting too wordy or using words written that are supposed to be dialogue when there's no way anybody's using them in dialogue. And, not to have it sound natural or believable anyway. We go on to a short addendum that says that following the interview, we have not been able to perceive any of the -1 instances. The anomaly has been classified as neutralized, and recently completed analysis of the window instances revealed their chemical makeup does not match any other known glass, and we reveal that the Mitsubishi car company produced the glass through an experimental technique, and the glass was only installed in this generation Galant and was discontinued due to high price. The exact makeup has not been used since, and that is where we end the article. So there are issues with this one, I want to be clear, but the reason that I chose this is because I believe this is a good example of the little differences that can turn, a good work into a great work, or turn a good work into a just okay average sort of work. And there are a number of little things. The wiki and the tone of the wiki is made up of little things, and getting that correct is the most difficult but also the most important part of making something that will stick. The tone is, it's for the most part, when we're not in dialogue, okay. There are a few things I would take issue with, like the passage Mitsubishi Car Company. It would be trivial for the writer to go look up, see who exactly was the holding company, who was making Mitsubishis at that point in time. Was this, the model in, we call it the Galant in America. It has different names in Europe and, Asia, the Middle East, Mexico even, they'll all have different names. And I say this, I'm a bit of a, speaking from a bit of a point of experience working in the auto industry. But these are little things that are important in making the work land and having that, really polished, professional tone, is doing the research and doing the due diligence on every little thing. And that's why, for me, that's why it takes so damn long to write a skip, is because I'll get 3 sentences in and I am down the rabbit hole. I am looking up Wikipedia on everything. I want to hit, I want every little piece to be, so polished and so detailed that if you go to look at any particular piece of it, you go, oh, that actually stands up to scrutiny. And doing the little things will make all of the difference in that regard. I am giving this a +1 because I think it shows good premise, and I think it shows good promise. In both aspects, it needs more, but I'm comfortable with where it is and where it can go with just a little bit of work, that I still will give this a +1. Last but not least, SCP-4147, titled Encyclopedia Obscura, written just about, 16, 18 hours ago, by M. Hate T, and I believe this is also a first-time entry. I can't verify that right now because Wikidot is jerking me around and generally being awful, but in any event, I believe it is, and this is, there are no pictures. We had quite a few today with either no pictures or only very lightly needed to really give any sort of impact to the work. That's interesting, because, okay, so 4905, there's a picture of the moon, but you know what the moon looks like. It helps that it's there. There's certainly lots of free, CC friendly pictures of the moon you can use, but we only really had the one, the previous one, 4350, that made any real use of the pictures at all to set the stage. I just find that an interesting concept this week. We have an object class of safe and minimal procedures. 4147 is to be contained inside 4 standard lockers in Site 28. Access is given only to research staff, senior researchers, and superiors, but further experimentation of the skip is pending O5 approval, but currently disallowed. MTF Sigma 3 bibliographers is to continue searching the Wanderer's Library, for other instances of 4147. And a description that indicates that the skip is the designation for a series of encyclopedias divided into several volumes each. The number of volumes varies per instance, and each one was published in 1912 by a Puffin Publishing. They're hardcover with non-anomalous ink and paper, with red-colored covers with gold text displaying a title. All titles translate to National Mythos Encyclopedia. Each instance of the skip covers a different language and includes descriptions of mythical creatures and legends unique to the nation whose official language corresponds to the text of the instance. And these are in encyclopedia format, so they're in alphabetical order. We have 4 instances currently held: English, Gaelic, Russian, and Japanese. The last page of each one is blank, and if an entry following the approved format is written in, the related superstitions in native speakers of the corresponding language will take root. The entry will become integrated into the culture of corresponding nationalities. And when when the book is closed, the entry page will be moved into its alphabetical position, and a new blank page will be added to the end. Interesting. So we have an experiment, a note that experimentation has been suspended by Order of 05. An ethics committee report condemned the experiments, describing their collateral damage as though, although not costing in human life, still damaging to the well-being of humanity as a whole. And the 05 Council has taken a referendum to resume testing, and they're currently reviewing the experiment logs. We created an experiment to test the hypothesis that, as well as the additions being retroactive, the mimetic effects would be neutralized by being aware of the skip itself. So we took a chance on, with Gaelic being the least spoken of the 4 languages, we chose a Dr. O'Donnell, a native Gaelic speaker from Ireland, with assistance to create this entry, and it reads, Leprechaun, the shoemaker. And we describe it as: leprechauns are fairies known across the world as symbols of Ireland, mischief, and luck. In the modern day, they're almost always seen in their iconic apparel and are popular presences in Irish fairy tales and holidays. Popular legends have leprechauns mending shoes and protecting their pots of gold hidden at the end of rainbows, with human beings trying to capture them or steal their hidden gold. Leprechauns have become one of the most recognizable and integral myths of Ireland and Irish culture, and they have no specific native region besides Ireland, and they are featured in the tale The Leprechaun or Fairy Shoemaker by William Allingham. And that is the entry that we put into the Gaelic Encyclopedia. We go from this to an interview log between Dr. O'Donnell, who wrote it, and Dr. Mitchell. And Dr. Mitchell says, "So that should be shuffled in there. I guess the post-experiment interview starts now. So, O'Donnell, do you remember writing the entry for Leprechaun in 4147? And Dr. O'Donnell says, "Well, yes." And Dr. Mitchell says, "Well, that settles it. Interview over." Dr. O'Donnell says, "Well, hold on. Doesn't that seem ridiculous?" And Mitchell says, "How so?" O'Donnell says, "Well, we've essentially just added an entry for something that already exists as a myth. I'm dumbfounded as to how it wasn't in there already. Doesn't that defeat the point of adding in an entry?" Mitchell says, "Please elaborate what you mean by already exists as a myth." And O'Donnell says, "I could ask you to elaborate on what you mean. The leprechaun is a pretty solidified part of Irish culture." And Mitchell says, "Okay, O'Donnell, I'm going to need to play you a tape." And O'Donnell says, "You don't really need to do that." And Mitchell says, "Well, you're right. I don't, if you can explain to me what you mean when you say the leprechaun, the idea that you spent all of this week developing as your idea is an established part of Irish culture." There's no response, and Mitchell says, "Then I have to play the tapes." And it shows O'Donnell explaining the leprechaun idea and the thought process behind its creation to other researchers. And Dr. O'Donnell is very visibly distraught while watching this tape. And says, "Well, it isn't possible for someone to have come up with the idea of a damn leprechaun. I must have been on something, or the tape was altered, or an info hazard, or mimetic, or whatever from 4147. That makes you an info hazard that changes the records of..." And Mitchell cuts him off, says, "Dr. O'Donnell, I'm going to ask you again. Do you remember writing and submitting the entry for Leprechaun in SCP-4147? O'Donnell says, "God damn it, of course I do. It was 5 minutes ago. We put it in, but also..." Mitchell cuts him off. "What else do you remember?" "Then what else do I remember? What don't I? My childhood, hearing stories at night about leprechauns falling prey to their own pranks. They always try to steal and get rich quickly and would always flounder in the face of hard work whenever the leprechaun would slip out of the hands of robbers. Stories about fools trying to find the gold at the end of the rainbow and missing the beauty of the rainbow itself. I remember my morals, if that is what you're asking. It's a silly little elf thing wearing green, but it was always there on St. Patrick's Day and in my nursery rhymes. How can it be just an entry we, or I, came up with and put in some godforsaken book? Mitchell says, I see. Interview over. I love this. I love this concept, and I love the execution. This dialogue is outstanding, and absolutely, you understand what's going on as O'Donnell does, really very close to the same moment, and I'm really impressed. Again, I think this is a first-time piece, and for this part, it's outstanding. It gets a little. I'm a little less enthused with this next section. I get why they did it, but what we've done is sampled the ink and paper. We're basically trying to figure out what part of this thing actually is anomalous. And we find that certain entries have a certain percentage of density to the ink, like a certain amount of them were done with this sort of ink and a certain amount were done with this other different ink. And we find that in certain cases, most of them are in a certain range of a lower density that comprise 78, 84, 88, and 61% of the encyclopedias. But we found higher density inks that appear to possibly have been added later. And we have a notable entry in the -1 in the English encyclopedia that it's notable because only part of it is of a different density. And this is where we leave the article with Santa Claus, Jolly St. Nick. It reads, one of the most recognizable examples of mythology, Santa Claus traces his roots back to St. Nicholas in the 3rd century. Santa Claus has come a long way since then, spreading through Dutch culture to America through Dutch immigrants in New York and then the world. Although myths inspired by St. Nick have appeared in many places besides America, and the United States only featuring a sort of adaptation of the Dutch legend, this American adaptation has become by far the most popular in the US and around the world. Today, Santa Claus is a symbol of gift-giving on Christmas Day across the globe, and it is custom for many parents to let their children believe he is real. Now, they should have done something to designate that this is the edition. I can tell this is the edition, but they should just bold this section to perhaps give it that little bit of differentiation. It then reads, the modern-day Santa Claus is almost always seen in his stylish red and white, but only started being presented this way thanks to the good people at the Coca-Cola Corporation. Santa premiered his iconic outfit drinking refreshing Coca-Cola products, and he is still as widely loved as Coca-Cola products to this day. Santa Claus is an international figure. End article. God, it's been so long since I've seen a good conspiracy theory skip. This is outstanding. This, from end to end, I love the concept, the dialogue, the execution, and the swerve at the end. Those are like the big 4 pieces to make a grade A, top of the line sort of skip. They have absolutely delivered that. There's like I have a lot of good things to say about this, but I think I've said most of them over the course of this. The concept is something that we've done in certain aspects in the past, but not quite this way, and I don't think pulled off in as compelling a manner when we talk about creating folklore through and entirely possibly through the entries of this encyclopedia, that you can add an entry and it's suddenly sort of retconned into the mythos of everybody that speaks that language. It is a really compelling concept. The dialogue, the whole section with the leprechaun is fantastic. My only knock is that there has to be a better way to set up this punch at the end than going into this ink density. I don't know what it is, not off the top of my head, but it works, but it's clunky, and perhaps it just needs better formatting. But for whatever reason, it drags a little right through this passage of this this experiment B. And it's that little bit. If this gets changed, reduced, or something to minimize the amount of time needed between this leprechaun setup and this punch with Santa Claus at the end, I think this will be I think it'll be one of the better skips I've seen so far this year. Fix that one little thing and I will, go on the record and say that. Until then, this is still absolutely outstanding work. This is a very easy +1 if you couldn't already figure that out. It is only at +16 right now. It's not very old. Give this thing a look. And, as always, give all of these a good look. I feel I do an okay job of getting the point across, getting the gist across, but this is, always, I think, will not hold up to reading these yourself and letting the emotional impact of the words hit you in a way that I won't. So with that said, that's week 13. Really enjoyed the stuff that we covered this week. I do plan, as I said, JamCon show Wednesday. That's going to be, what day is Wednesday? April the 3rd. Watch for that on April 3rd. Week 14 show should be April 5th, and with any luck, April the 12th. I'm hoping thereabouts I will have my new items for the store, the SCP Foundation pins, which you can still pre-order at store.scp.cafe. So hopefully I'll have some news there. And week 13. Really enjoyed this week. If you have any feedback, thoughts, you can leave a comment on scp.cafe or shoot me an email, mailbag@scp.cafe. Until the JamCon show, keep reading, keep writing, and I'll see you on the other side.